The letter arrived on the coldest December morning Willa Norton had ever endured in Boston, bearing news that would uproot her entire existence and transport her 2,000 miles west to a man whose face she had never seen. Her father had been dead 3 months when the attorney informed her that his final act had been to arrange her marriage to Vincent Dalton, a cattle rancher in Fort Worth, Texas, as settlement for a gambling debt that had consumed what remained of the family fortune. She stood at the train station in January of 1878, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air as she clutched a carpet bag containing everything she owned. The journey had taken 8 days, each mile carrying her further from the refined parlors of Massachusetts and deeper into a world she understood only through dime novels and newspaper accounts. Fort Worth loomed before her like something from another century, all wooden storefronts and dirt streets, cattle pens stretching toward horizons she could barely comprehend. Snow had followed her west, an unusual cold snap that left the Texas town dusted white and shivering. The man waiting at the station was tall enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Vincent Dalton wore a heavy sheepskin coat, dark hair curling at his collar beneath a wide-brimmed hat, and an expression that revealed absolutely nothing about his thoughts on this arrangement. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with a weathered face that suggested years of hard living under an unforgiving sun. His eyes were a startling shade of green, like bottled glass held up to light. "Miss Norton." His voice was low, rougher than the voices she had known in Boston, shaped by wind and open spaces. "Mr. Dalton." She forced herself to stand straight despite the exhaustion weighing down her bones. She had not slept properly in over a week, dozing fitfully against train windows and in crowded stations where strange men stared and made comments she pretended not to hear. He took her bag without asking, his calloused hands making the worn leather look small. "The wagon is this way. We have about an hour's ride to the ranch." The silence between them stretched taut as fence wire as they moved through the bustling street. Cowboys on horseback kicked up mud and melting snow. Women in practical wool dresses hurried past with baskets, their faces wind-burned and purposeful. Everything smelled of livestock and wood smoke and something wild she could not name. The wagon was utilitarian, built for work rather than comfort. Vincent helped her up with a firm grip on her elbow, then swung himself onto the seat beside her. The proximity felt almost improper, though they were supposedly to be married within days. He clicked his tongue at the horses, and they lurched forward into the white landscape. "I want you to know I did not ask for this," Willa said after they had cleared the town. Her voice sounded too sharp in the vast quiet of the prairie. "My father made this arrangement without my knowledge or consent." Vincent kept his eyes on the road ahead. "I am aware. Your father lost considerably more than he had to me in that poker game. When he offered you as settlement, I thought he was joking." He paused, jaw working. "I should have refused." "Then why did you not?" The question came out more accusatory than she intended. He finally looked at her, those green eyes assessing. "Because I am tired of eating my own cooking and mending my own clothes. Because this ranch needs a woman's hand if it is ever going to be more than just a place where I work myself to death. Because I figured a arranged marriage might be more honest than the alternative, where people pretend at feelings that fade soon enough anyway." The brutal honesty of it struck her silent. At least he was not pretending this was some romantic notion, some adventure story where the heroine fell helplessly in love with the rugged frontiersman. This was a transaction, pure and simple, and perhaps there was a kind of mercy in acknowledging that truth. The ranch appeared gradually, materializing from the white expanse like something conjured. A two-story house, surprisingly well built, stood at the center of several outbuildings. Corrals held horses that lifted their heads to watch their approach. Smoke rose from the chimney, a gray column against the pale sky. "It is not much," Vincent said, "but it is mine. Yours too, I suppose, once we are married." "When is the wedding?" Willa asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I told the preacher we would come to town Saturday." "That gives you 4 days to decide if you can stomach the idea, or if you would rather I put you back on that train to Boston." She turned to stare at him. "You would let me leave? I am not in the business of keeping women against their will." He brought the wagon to a stop near the house. "Your father's debt dies with him as far as I am concerned. You are here, and that is more than I expected. But if you want to go, I will give you the train fare and no hard feelings." It was the kindness in the offer that nearly undid her. Willa blinked rapidly against the sting in her eyes. "I have nothing to return to. My father left debts throughout Boston. I have no family, no prospects. At least here I have a purpose, however unwanted." Vincent climbed down and came around to help her from the wagon. His hands on her waist were impersonal but steady. "Then let me show you the house. You can have the upstairs bedroom until Saturday. I will sleep in the bunkhouse with the hands." The interior of the house surprised her. It was cleaner than she expected, with real glass windows and a stone fireplace large enough to stand in. The furniture was simple but well made, clearly crafted by someone who understood wood. A kitchen occupied one side of the main room, with a cast iron stove and a hand pump for water. Stairs led up to what she assumed were the bedrooms. "I built most of this myself," Vincent said, setting her bag by the stairs. "Started 5 years ago with just the shell, added to it as I could afford to." "It is lovely," Willa said, and meant it. There was something solid about this place, something real that all the gilt and crystal of her Boston life had lacked. Her family had been all facade, beautiful rooms in a rented house, appearances maintained while the foundation rotted with debt and lies. "I will start a fire," Vincent said, moving to the hearth. "You look half frozen." She was cold, had been cold since leaving Massachusetts, the chill seeping into her bones until she wondered if she would ever feel warm again. She watched as Vincent built up the fire with practiced efficiency, arranging kindling and logs with careful precision. Soon flames were crackling, heat beginning to push back the winter chill. He stood and brushed off his hands, then looked at her with an expression that might have been uncertainty. "I know this is not what you wanted for your life. I know I am not what you wanted. But I am thinking we have 4 days before we have to make any decisions. So maybe we could use that time to learn each other a bit, see if this arrangement might work." "Learn each other," Willa repeated. "By the fire," Vincent said, gesturing to the chairs positioned near the hearth. "Talking, asking questions, figuring out if we can stand each other's company for more than an hour at a time." He paused. "I am not a complicated man, Miss Norton. I work hard, I keep my word, and I do not drink more than a whiskey on Saturday nights. But I figure you should know more than that before you tie yourself to me legal-like." Something in her chest loosened at his words. This was not romance, not the passionate declarations she had read about in books, but it was honest, real. And perhaps that was worth more than pretty lies. "Very well," she said, removing her traveling coat. "Let us learn each other by the fire." They sat in chairs angled toward the hearth, close enough to feel the heat but with enough distance between them to maintain propriety. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Inside, the fire popped and hissed. "Where should we start?" Willa asked. Vincent leaned back, the chair creaking under his weight. "Tell me about Boston. What was your life like before this?" She considered how to answer. "My mother died when I was 12. After that, it was just my father and me in a house too large for two people. He was in business, or at least he claimed to be. Imports and exports, though I never quite understood what he actually did. We had servants, beautiful clothes, invitations to parties, but it was all smoke and mirrors. She stared into the flames. I did not realize how bad the debts were until the attorney came after the funeral. Apparently my father had been gambling for years, borrowing against money he did not have, making promises he could not keep. Is that why he offered you to settle the debt? Vincent asked quietly. I suppose he thought it was better than leaving me penniless in the street. At least this way I have a home, even if it comes with obligations. She looked at him. What about you? How does a man end up ranching in Texas? My family had a farm in Missouri, Vincent began. Nothing fancy, just enough land to keep us fed and clothed. I was the youngest of 4 sons, which meant there was not much inheritance coming my way. When I was 18, I headed west to make my own fortune. He smiled, but there was no humor in it. That was 9 years ago. Took me 6 years of working for other men before I had enough saved to buy this land. Been building it up ever since. You see your family? Willa asked. My parents died of fever the year after I left. My brothers are scattered now. One in California, one went north to Montana. The other died in the war before I was old enough to join up. He said it matter-of-factly, but Willa heard the loss beneath the words. So we are both alone, she said softly. Seems that way. Vincent stood and added another log to the fire. You hungry? I could heat up some stew. I could help, Willa offered, rising. You just traveled 8 days on a train. Sit. Rest. There will be plenty of work for you if you decide to stay. She watched as he moved around the kitchen, efficient and capable. He ladled stew from a pot into 2 bowls, cut thick slices of bread that looked slightly stale but edible. They ate at a small table near the window, watching the snow begin to fall again in earnest. This is good, Willa said, surprised. The stew was simple but well seasoned, rich with beef and vegetables. I told you I am tired of my own cooking, Vincent said. That is about the extent of what I can make. Stew, beans, bacon, coffee that could strip paint. If you can cook better than that, you would already be improving things considerably. I can cook, Willa said. My mother taught me before she died. She said a woman should know how to run a household properly, even if we had servants to do the actual work. After she passed, I spent a lot of time in the kitchen. The cook was kind and patient with me. It was better than sitting alone in that empty house. They finished eating in comfortable silence. Vincent cleared the dishes and washed them in a basin, his movements practiced. Willa found herself studying him, this stranger who was supposed to become her husband in 4 days. He was handsome in a rough-hewn way, all strong angles and sun-darkened skin. His hands were scarred from work, but they moved with surprising gentleness as he dried the bowls and put them away. You must be exhausted, Vincent said, turning back to her. The bedroom upstairs is ready. I put fresh linens on the bed yesterday. Thank you. Willa stood, suddenly aware of how tired she truly was. Every muscle ached from days of sitting in cramped train seats. Her head felt stuffed with cotton. Vincent picked up her carpetbag and led her upstairs. The bedroom was small but clean, with a real bed covered in quilts, a washstand, and a window overlooking the snowy prairie. A small stove in the corner provided heat. If you need anything, I will be in the bunkhouse, Vincent said, setting her bag on the floor. Just ring the bell on the porch. Someone will hear it. The bunkhouse, Willa asked, where the ranch hands sleep. I have 3 men who work for me full-time. Good men, hard-working. They will be curious about you, but they know to be respectful. He moved toward the door, then paused. I meant what I said earlier. If you want to leave, I will not stop you, but I hope you will stay, at least long enough to give this a fair chance." "I will think about it," Willa said. After he left, she unpacked her few belongings and changed into her nightgown. The bed was surprisingly comfortable, the quilts heavy and warm. She lay in the darkness, listening to the wind howl outside, and tried to imagine what her life might look like if she stayed. Cooking in that kitchen. Keeping this house. Sitting by the fire with Vincent Dalton, learning the shape of a life so different from anything she had known. Sleep claimed her before she reached any conclusions. She woke to gray morning light and the smell of coffee. For a moment she was disoriented, expecting to see the water-stained ceiling of her Boston boarding house. Then memory returned, along with a deep sense of dislocation. She dressed quickly in her warmest dress and went downstairs. Vincent stood at the stove, pouring coffee into tin cups. He looked up when she entered. "Morning, I hope I did not wake you." "No, I should be up." She accepted the coffee he offered, grateful for the warmth. "What time is it?" "Just after 7. I have been up since 5, tending to the animals. The hands are out checking the cattle, making sure none of them froze last night." Willa moved to the window. Snow covered everything, pristine and untouched. "Does it snow often here?" "Not usually this much or this early. This cold snap is unusual for Fort Worth. Usually our winters are mild, all things considered." He joined her at the window. "But I am not complaining. The moisture is good for the land, and it is easier to work outside in cold than in the brutal heat of summer." "How hot does it get?" Willa asked. "Over 100 degrees sometimes. The sun beats down like a hammer, and the wind does not cool you off, just pushes the heat around." He smiled slightly. "But that is months away. Right now we just need to make it through winter." They spent the morning together in the house. Vincent showed her where everything was kept, explained the routines of the ranch, the rhythms that structured his days. Willa asked questions, dozens of them, trying to understand this new world. How many cattle did he run? Where did he get his supplies? What happened if someone got sick or injured so far from town? Vincent answered everything patiently, seeming almost relieved to have someone to talk to. She realized he must be lonely out here, with only hired hands for company. In the afternoon, he took her outside to meet the animals. The horses watched them approach with intelligent eyes. Vincent introduced each one by name and temperament. "This is Sable," he said, stroking the nose of a black mare. "She is the smartest horse I have ever owned, knows the ranch better than I do." He looked at Willa. "Do you ride?" "I took lessons as a girl, but it has been years." She tentatively reached out to touch Sable's neck. The mare's coat was warm despite the cold air. "I could teach you again if you wanted. It is important to be able to ride out here. Distances are too great for walking." He moved to the next stall. "This is Thunder. He is young and still learning, but he has good instincts." They visited the chickens next, and the milk cow Vincent kept for fresh dairy. Willa found herself charmed by the simple routines, the honest work of it all. In Boston, everything had been artificial, performances for an audience that did not care. That evening they returned to their chairs by the fire. Vincent had shot a pair of rabbits, and Willa insisted on cooking them. She made a simple stew, better seasoned than his version, with dumplings that steamed when broken open. Vincent ate 3 bowls and declared it the best meal he had had in a year. "Tell me what you like to do," Vincent said as they settled back into their chairs. "For pleasure, I mean. Do you read?" "So, play music." "I read whenever I could," Willa said. "My father had a library full of books he never opened. I worked my way through most of them over the years. History, poetry, novels. I was not particular." She paused. "I also drew a bit, nothing very good, just sketches of things I saw. Birds mostly, and flowers from the garden." "I have books," Vincent said, gesturing to a shelf she had not noticed before. Not many, but a few. You are welcome to them. And if you wanted paper and pencils for drawing, I could get them in town." "You would do that?" Willa asked, surprised. "Why would I not? Just because this is an arrangement does not mean you have to be miserable. We are going to be spending a lot of time together if you stay. Seems reasonable that you should have things that make you happy." She studied him across the firelight. "You are not what I expected." "What did you expect?" Vincent asked. "Someone harder, I think. Someone who would see me as property he won right in a card game. Someone who would not care about books or drawing or whether I was happy." "I am hard when I need to be," Vincent said. "This is not an easy life, and there is no room for weakness when you are building something from nothing. But I am not cruel, and I do not take pleasure in making others suffer." He met her eyes. "If you marry me on Saturday, I will do my best to be a good husband. I will work to provide for you, protect you, treat you with respect. I cannot promise you will be happy, but I can promise I will never deliberately hurt you." "That is more than many women get," Willa said quietly. They talked late into the night, the fire burning low, then built up again when the cold crept too close. Vincent told her about the ranch, his plans to expand, the challenges of raising cattle in Texas where drought and disease and rustlers were constant threats. Willa told him about the books she loved, the places she dreamed of seeing, the life she had imagined before her father's death shattered all her illusions. The second day followed a similar pattern. They fell into an easy rhythm, working together to maintain the house and care for the animals. Willa cooked while Vincent handled the heavier chores, and in the evenings they sat by the fire and talked. She learned that he loved this land with a fierceness that bordered on obsession, that he could identify every bird by its call, that he had taught himself to read using a battered copy of the Bible and sheer determination. Vincent learned that Willa had a sharp wit and a sharper tongue when provoked, that she was stronger than she looked, that she missed her mother with an ache that had never fully healed. He learned that she was lonely, just as he was, and that she wanted to belong somewhere with a desperation she tried hard to hide. On the third day, one of the ranch hands came to the house. His name was Tom, and he was a weathered man in his 50s with kind eyes and a thick mustache. He tipped his hat to Willa. "Begging your pardon, Miss Norton, but we have got a problem with the north fence. Needs 2 people to fix it proper, and the other boys are dealing with a cow caught in the creek. Vincent, I could use your help if you can spare a few hours." Vincent looked at Willa. "Will you be all right here alone?" "I am not helpless," Willa said. "Go. Do what you need to do." After they left, Willa explored the house more thoroughly. She found Vincent's bedroom on the ground floor, small and Spartan with a narrow bed and little else. The rest of the downstairs was the main living area and kitchen. Upstairs was the larger bedroom where she slept and a smaller room filled with tools and supplies. She spent the afternoon cleaning, not because the house was particularly dirty, but because she needed to do something with her hands. She scrubbed the floors, washed the windows, organized the pantry. Physical work helped quiet her mind, which kept spinning with questions she could not answer. Could she really marry a stranger? Could she build a life in this harsh, beautiful place so far from everything she had known? But then, what was the alternative? Return to Boston and face her father's creditors. Try to find work as a seamstress or governess, barely scraping by. At least here she had the chance of something more, something real. Vincent and Tom returned as the sun was setting, both covered in mud and looking exhausted. Tom tipped his hat again and headed back to the bunkhouse. Vincent stood in the doorway, looking sheepish. "I am a mess," he said. "There is water heating on the stove," Willa said. "I thought you might need to wash when you got back." Something in his expression softened. "Thank you." She stepped outside while he washed, giving him privacy. The sky was clear for the first time since she had arrived, stars beginning to emerge in the deepening blue. The cold was sharp and clean, and she could hear cattle lowing in the distance. This could be her life, she thought. These sounds, these smells, this vast open space. It was so different from Boston it might as well be another planet, but perhaps that was exactly what she needed. A complete break from the past, a chance to become someone new. When she went back inside, Vincent had changed into clean clothes and was hanging the wet towel by the fire. His hair was damp, curling at his collar. "The house looks different," he said, glancing around. "I cleaned," Willa said. "I hope you do not mind." "Mind? It is the cleanest this place has been since I built it." He smiled, and the expression transformed his face, making him look younger, less burdened. "Thank you." They ate dinner together, a simple meal of salt pork and beans that Willa had managed to make palatable with herbs she found in the pantry. Afterward, they returned to their chairs by the fire. "Tomorrow is Friday," Vincent said, "our last day before the wedding. If you are having second thoughts, now is the time to say so." Willa was quiet for a long moment, watching the flames dance. "I am terrified," she finally said. "I am terrified of marrying you, and I am terrified of leaving. I feel like I am standing at a crossroads and both paths lead into darkness." Vincent leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I am scared too," he admitted. "I have been alone a long time. I am not sure I remember how to be with someone else, how to make room in my life for another person. What if I am a terrible husband? What if you hate it here and end up miserable? What if it works?" Willa asked softly. "What if we actually manage to build something good together?" "Is that what you want?" Vincent asked. "To try, I think so," Willa said. "I think I want to stay." The relief on his face was palpable. "Then we will make it work. Somehow we will figure it out together." On Friday, they rode into Fort Worth together. Vincent drove the wagon and Willa sat beside him, wrapped in blankets against the cold. The snow was melting now, turning the roads to mud, but the air had a crystalline quality that made everything seem sharper, clearer. In town, Vincent introduced her to the shopkeepers and the few townspeople they encountered. He bought her fabric for new dresses, proper boots for ranch work, and a set of pencils and paper for drawing. When she protested the expense, he waved her off. "You are going to be my wife," he said. "Let me do this." They met with the preacher, a thin man with a booming voice who seemed delighted at the prospect of a wedding. They arranged for the ceremony to take place at noon the following day, at the small church on the edge of town. On the way back to the ranch, as the sun was setting and painting the snow-covered prairie in shades of gold and pink, Vincent said, "I want you to know something. After we are married, I will not expect anything from you that you are not ready to give. We can take this slow, figure things out at our own pace." Willa looked at him, at his profile against the fading light. "That is kind of you." "It is practical," Vincent corrected. "We are going into this as strangers. We need time to become something more than that." That night, their last night before the wedding, they sat by the fire and talked until long after midnight. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing stories and dreams and fears. Vincent told her about the time he had been caught in a stampede and nearly trampled to death, about the first time he had delivered a calf and felt the miracle of new life in his hands. Willa told him about her mother's final days, about the weight of watching someone you love slowly fade, about the guilt she still carried for feeling relieved when it was finally over. "You should not feel guilty for that," Vincent said gently. "Loving someone does not mean wanting them to suffer endlessly. Sometimes the kindest thing is to let go." "I know that in my head," Willa said. "My heart is slower to accept it. As the fire burned low and exhaustion finally caught up with them, Vincent stood and offered his hand to help Willa up. She took it, and for a moment they stood close, hands clasped. "Tomorrow you will be my wife," Vincent said quietly. "Tomorrow you will be my husband," Willa replied. "Are you ready for that?" he asked. "I think so," Willa said. "Ask me again tomorrow." The wedding day dawned clear and cold. Willa dressed in her best gown, a dark blue dress that had seen better days but was still respectable. She pinned up her honey-brown hair and stared at her reflection in the small mirror, trying to recognize the woman looking back at her. Vincent waited downstairs, wearing what was clearly his best suit. He looked uncomfortable in the formal clothes, but handsome. When Willa came down the stairs, he stopped breathing for a moment. "You look beautiful," he said. "You look uncomfortable," Willa replied, but she was smiling. The three ranch hands rode with them to town, dressed in their own best clothes, ready to serve as witnesses. The church was small and drafty, with rough-hewn pews and a simple wooden cross. The preacher waited at the altar, Bible in hand. The ceremony was brief. They spoke the traditional vows, their voices steady despite the enormity of what they were doing. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent kissed her gently, almost chastely, a promise of respect rather than passion. They were married. The ranch hands congratulated them and headed to the saloon to celebrate. Vincent and Willa drove back to the ranch in silence, both processing the irreversible step they had just taken. At the house, Vincent helped her down from the wagon. "We are married now," he said, as if testing the words. "We are," Willa agreed. "I meant what I said yesterday," Vincent told her. "We can take this at whatever pace you are comfortable with. There is no rush." That night, Vincent slept in his small bedroom on the ground floor and Willa slept in the larger bedroom upstairs, just as they had all week. It was not a traditional wedding night, but it felt right for them. They were still learning each other, still figuring out how to be together. The weeks that followed fell into a pattern. Vincent worked the ranch, long days of hard physical labor that left him exhausted by evening. Willa learned to cook on the temperamental stove, to churn butter, to preserve vegetables, to do the 1,000 tasks that kept a household running. She also learned to ride again, spending hours in the saddle with Vincent patiently coaching her until she could stay on Sable even at a gallop. They grew comfortable with each other in small ways. Vincent started reaching for her hand as they sat by the fire. Willa began touching his shoulder when she passed behind his chair. They were building something, slowly and carefully, brick by brick. In late January, a warm spell melted the last of the snow. The prairie turned green almost overnight, wildflowers pushing up through the earth. Willa spent her days exploring the land around the ranch, sketching the birds and plants she found. She had never felt so free, so unburdened by others' expectations. One evening in February, as they sat by the fire, Vincent said, "I need to tell you something." Willa looked up from her mending. "What is it?" "Your father did not actually lose you to me in that poker game," Vincent said slowly. "At least, not the way the attorney made it sound." Willa set down her sewing. "What do you mean?" "Your father did lose a considerable sum to me, more than he could pay. But when he offered you as settlement, I refused. I told him that was barbaric, that I would not take a woman as payment for a debt." Vincent stared into the fire. "A week later, I got a letter from him. He explained your situation, that he was dying and you would be left with nothing, that his creditors would come after you for his debts. He begged me to marry you, to give you a home and protection. He offered to write it up as a gambling debt so you would not feel like charity." Willa felt something crack open in her chest. "He asked you to take care of me. He loved you," Vincent said. "Maybe he was not a good father in a lot of ways, but he loved you enough to make sure you would not be left alone and defenseless." I agreed because I was tired of being alone and because the offer seemed mutually beneficial, but I wanted you to know the truth. You were not lost in a card game like some prize to be claimed. You were sent here by a father who loved you enough to swallow his pride and beg a stranger to protect his daughter. Tears streamed down Willa's face. Why did you not tell me this before? I was not sure you would believe me. And I thought maybe it was easier for you to be angry at your father than to grieve him properly. Vincent moved from his chair to kneel before hers. I am sorry I lied by omission. You deserve to know. Willa reached out and cupped his face in her hands. Thank you for telling me. Thank you for agreeing to his request. Thank you for being kind when you did not have to be. Vincent covered her hands with his own. You are easy to be kind to, Willa. Something shifted between them in that moment. The last barrier crumbled and what remained was honest affection, real care for each other. That night when Vincent rose to go to his own bedroom, Willa caught his hand. Stay, she said softly. If you want to. Are you sure? Vincent asked. I am sure. He climbed the stairs with her, and that night they truly became husband and wife. Vincent was gentle and patient, making sure she felt safe and cared for. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, listening to the wind outside. I think I am falling in love with you, Willa whispered. I think I am already there, Vincent replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Spring arrived in full force, transforming the prairie into an ocean of wildflowers and green grass. The cattle grew fat on the rich grazing. Vincent hired an additional hand to help with the increased work. Willa planted a vegetable garden near the house and watched with delight as the first green shoots emerged from the soil. They fell into the rhythms of marriage, learning each other's habits and quirks. Vincent discovered that Willa sang while she worked, old songs her mother had taught her. Willa learned that Vincent had nightmares sometimes, echoes of his hard early years, and that the best way to calm him was to press close and breathe steadily until he relaxed back into sleep. In April, Willa realized she was pregnant. She told Vincent one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. A baby, he kept saying. We are going to have a baby. Are you happy? Willa asked, though the answer was obvious from his face. Happier than I ever thought I could be, Vincent said. He set her down carefully, suddenly worried. Should you be standing? Do you need to rest? Should we get the doctor? Willa laughed at his concern. I am pregnant, not made of glass. Women have been doing this since the beginning of time. But Vincent fretted anyway, insisting she rest more, lift less, take better care of herself. It was endearing, his fierce protectiveness, even when it bordered on annoying. The summer was brutally hot, just as Vincent had warned. Willa spent the worst days in the house, windows open to catch any stray breeze, working on baby clothes while her belly grew round. Vincent came in from the field sunburned and exhausted, but he always had energy to sit with her in the evenings, talking to the baby through her belly, telling their unborn child about the ranch and the cattle and the life they were building together. In September, during a thunderstorm that rattled the windows and turned the prairie to mud, Willa went into labor. The doctor could not make it through the flooded roads, so Vincent delivered the baby himself with the help of Tom's wife, who lived with her husband in the bunkhouse. It was a boy, red-faced and screaming, with a shock of dark hair and lungs that suggested he would be loud all his life. They named him Thomas William, after Tom, who had become a good friend, and Willa's father, William. Vincent held his son with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face. He is perfect, he kept saying. Willa, he is perfect. He is ours, Willa said, exhausted but happy. Our family. The first year of Thomas's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and precious moments. They learned to be parents together, making mistakes and figuring things out as they went. The ranch prospered. Vincent sold a herd that spring for enough money to expand the house, adding a proper nursery and a larger kitchen. On a cold December evening, as they sat by the fire with Thomas sleeping in Willa's arms, Vincent said, "Do you remember 2 years ago today? When you arrived at the train station, how could I forget?" Willa said. "I was terrified." "So was I," Vincent admitted. "I had no idea what I was doing. I just knew I needed to try to give us a chance." "I am glad you did," Willa said. "I am glad my father sent me here. I am glad you said yes to his request. I cannot imagine my life without you now." Vincent leaned over and kissed her softly. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Willa Dalton." "We are the best thing that happened to each other," Willa corrected. The years rolled on, bringing changes and challenges but also deep contentment. A second child arrived, a daughter they named Margaret after Vincent's mother. Then another son, James, who had Willa's gentle nature and Vincent's stubborn determination. The ranch grew into one of the most successful in the area. Vincent's reputation as a fair employer and skilled rancher spread, and young men came from miles around looking for work. The house expanded again to accommodate their growing family, and Willa filled it with warmth and laughter and love. They faced hardships too. A drought one summer that killed half the herd, a winter so brutal they nearly lost everything, a fire in the barn that took months to recover from. But they weathered it all together, their bond strengthening with each trial. On their 10th anniversary, Vincent took Willa back to the spot where he had first picked her up in the wagon. They stood looking out over land that was green and lush, dotted with cattle bearing Vincent's brand. "You ever regret it?" Vincent asked. "Staying here instead of going back to Boston?" Willa turned to look at him, this man she had learned to love so completely. His face was more weathered now, lines carved around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun. But those green eyes still made her heart skip. "Not for a single moment," she said firmly. "This is my home. You are my home. I would not trade this life for anything." "Even on the hard days?" Vincent asked. "Especially on the hard days," Willa said. "Because those are the days when we prove how strong we are together." They kissed there in the prairie grass, with the sound of cattle lowing and birds singing and their children playing near the creek. It was not the life Willa had imagined for herself in those cold Boston days. It was better. By the time they had been married 15 years, the Dalton Ranch was a fixture in Fort Worth. Vincent had become a respected member of the community, serving on the town council and helping to establish the first proper school. Willa ran the household with efficient grace, but she also found time to pursue her art. Her drawings of prairie life were sold in the general store, and people came from miles around to buy them. Thomas grew into a strong young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did. Margaret was sharp and quick-witted, determined to become a teacher. James was the dreamer, always with his nose in a book, talking about seeing the wider world someday. On winter evenings, the family gathered around the fire that had witnessed the beginning of Vincent and Willa's love story. They told stories and played games and simply enjoyed being together. Sometimes Willa thought back to that scared girl who had arrived at the train station, not knowing if she would survive what came next. She had not just survived. She had thrived. She had found love in the most unexpected place, with a man who had been a stranger but became her everything. She had built a life richer than anything she could have imagined. One night, after the children had gone to bed, Vincent and Willa sat in their usual chairs by the fire. Vincent reached over and took her hand, a gesture so familiar now it was like breathing. "What are you thinking about?" Vincent asked. "About how lucky I am," Willa said. about how strange life is, the way it takes you places you never expected to go. You think your father knew?" Vincent asked. "That sending you here would lead to this, I think he hoped," Willa said. "I think he saw something in your letters that made him believe you were a good man, someone who would treat me well. Maybe he even hoped we might grow to care for each other. But this—" She gestured around the comfortable room toward the stairs where their children slept peacefully. "I do not think even he could have imagined this." "I am grateful to him," Vincent said, "for trusting me with you, for giving us this chance." "So am I," Willa said softly. As they sat there in the firelight, hands clasped, they thought about all the years that had passed and all the years still to come. They thought about that first conversation by this very fire, when they had been strangers trying to find common ground. They thought about the slow building of trust and affection that had bloomed into deep, abiding love. The fire crackled and popped, just as it had that first winter night. Outside, snow began to fall again, dusting the prairie in white. But inside the house, Vincent had built and Willa had made a home. There was only warmth and contentment and the quiet joy of two people who had found each other against all odds. Vincent raised her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "I love you, Willa Dalton." "I love you, Vincent Dalton," she replied. The years continued their steady march. The children grew and began lives of their own. Thomas married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring spread and took over more of the daily operations of the ranch. Margaret went east to college, fulfilling her dream of becoming a teacher, though she returned every summer to the home she loved. James traveled to California and sent letters full of adventures and discoveries. Vincent and Willa grew older together, their hair turning gray, their bodies moving slower but their love burning as steady as ever. They became grandparents and then great-grandparents, watching their family tree spread and flourish across Texas and beyond. The ranch continued to prosper under Thomas's management, but Vincent remained involved, unable to fully give up the land he had carved from nothing. He and Willa spent their days in comfortable companionship, working side by side as they had for decades. On their 30th anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Children and grandchildren filled the house with noise and laughter. There was music and dancing and enough food to feed an army. As the sun set and the party continued, Vincent pulled Willa aside. "Come with me," he said, taking her hand. He led her outside to the porch where they had sat so many evenings watching the sun paint the sky. The noise of the party faded to a pleasant hum behind them. 30 years, Vincent said, shaking his head in wonder. 30 years since I picked up a terrified girl at the train station and brought her home. 30 years since you told me we should learn each other by the fire, Willa said, leaning against him. Best decision I ever made staying here with you. Best decision I ever made, too, Vincent said. Agreeing to your father's request, taking a chance on a stranger, believing we could build something good together. We did more than build something good, Willa said. We built something extraordinary. They stood together watching the stars emerge, just as they had so many times before. Behind them, through the windows, they could see their family gathered around the fire. Their children and grandchildren, all of them born from the love between a cowboy and a city girl who had been given to each other by chance, but chosen each other every day since. Do you remember that first night? Willa asked. When you said we should use those 4 days to learn each other. Of course I remember, Vincent said. I was trying to sound confident, but I had no idea what I was doing. I just knew I could not send you away without at least trying. You said we could see if we could stand each other's company for more than an hour at a time, Willa reminded him, smiling. I think we managed it, Vincent said, pulling her close. Barely. Willa laughed and swatted his arm playfully. Barely indeed, after only 30 years. They went back inside to join the party, hands clasped, hearts full. The fire burned bright in the hearth, just as it had on that first winter night when they began their journey together. And it would keep burning for all the years to come, a constant in the life they had built through patience and trust, and the kind of love that grows deeper with time. The next decade brought new challenges. A bout of pneumonia left Vincent weaker than he had been, though he refused to admit it. Willa's eyesight began to fail, making her detailed drawings more difficult. But they adapted, as they always had, finding new ways to do the things they loved and new reasons to cherish each day. Their great-grandchildren came to visit, climbing on Vincent's lap to hear stories of the old days, when Fort Worth was barely more than a frontier town, and the prairie stretched endless and untamed. They begged Willa to teach them to draw, and she did, her skilled hands guiding theirs as they learned to capture the beauty of the world around them. On a spring morning when the wildflowers were blooming and the air smelled of growth and possibility, Vincent and Willa sat on the porch in rocking chairs Thomas had made for them. They were both in their 70s now, their bodies marked by decades of hard work and good living. "I have been thinking," Vincent said, his voice still strong despite his years, "about that letter your father sent me, the one where he asked me to take care of you." "What about it?" Willa asked, her hand finding his. "I kept it," Vincent said. "All these years I kept it in my desk. I thought maybe someday you would want to read it, to see what he wrote." "I would like that," Willa said softly. Vincent went inside and returned with a yellowed envelope. He handed it to Willa, who opened it carefully. The paper inside was brittle with age, the ink faded but still legible. She read her father's words, his plea for Vincent to give his daughter a home and protection, his admission of his failures as a father, his desperate hope that she would find happiness in Texas. Tears slipped down Willa's cheeks as she read. "He did love me," she whispered. "He did," Vincent confirmed, "and he would be proud of you, of the life you have built, the woman you became." "He would be grateful to you," Willa said, looking up at her husband, "for keeping your promise, for giving me more than just a home, for giving me a life full of love and purpose." "You gave me the same," Vincent said. "I was just existing before you came. You taught me how to truly live." They sat together in peaceful silence, watching the prairie come alive with spring. Birds sang in the trees they had planted decades ago. Cattle grazed on grass their great-grandchildren would one day manage. The house behind them was full of memories, every room holding stories of the life they had shared. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, warming their faces, Willa thought about the journey that had brought her here. She thought about the frightened girl on the train platform, the uncertain woman who had agreed to marry a stranger, the wife and mother and grandmother she had become. Every step of the journey had been worth it. Every hardship overcome had made the joy sweeter. "Vincent," she said softly. "Yes, love, thank you." "For what?" he asked, though she could hear the smile in his voice. "For everything. For suggesting we learn each other by the fire, for being patient with me, for building this life with me, for loving me the way you do." Vincent lifted her hand to his lips, just as he had done thousands of times before. "Loving you has been the easiest thing I ever did, Willa, and the best." They remained there on the porch until the dinner bell rang, calling them inside to the meal waiting, to the family who loved them, to the life that continued to unfold in beautiful and surprising ways. And that night, as they lay in bed with the windows open to let in the sweet spring air, they held each other close and gave thanks for the unexpected gift they had been given all those years ago, the gift of time to learn each other, the gift of a fire to gather around, the gift of love that had started as a tentative hope and grown into something unshakable and eternal. Vincent passed away peacefully in his sleep 3 years later, at the age of 76. He died as he had lived, with Willa beside him, holding his hand. The funeral brought people from all over Texas, ranchers and townsfolk and friends, who came to pay respects to a man who had lived with integrity and kindness. Willa grieved deeply, but she did not break. She had spent 43 years learning to be strong beside Vincent, and that strength sustained her now. She remained on the ranch, surrounded by the family they had created, the legacy they had built together. She lived for another 8 years, spending her days drawing and teaching her great-grandchildren, and sitting by the fire where her love story had begun. She told anyone who would listen about Vincent, keeping his memory alive through stories and laughter, and the deep affection that colored every word. On a winter evening much like the one when she had first arrived in Texas, Willa sat in her chair by the fire. The house was quiet, the family having gone to their own homes for the night. She looked around the room, seeing echoes of all the years that had passed within these walls. She could almost see Vincent sitting across from her, green eyes warm with love, telling her they would figure things out together. "We did," she said aloud to the empty room. "We figured it all out just like you promised." She closed her eyes, content and at peace. When her great-granddaughter came to check on her in the morning, Willa had passed on, a gentle smile on her face, her hand stretched out toward the empty chair where Vincent used to sit. They buried her beside Vincent on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a sky as vast and blue as the one that had greeted her that first morning so many years ago. The entire town came to the funeral, and stories were told of the elegant Boston girl who had become the heart of the Dalton ranch, the artist whose drawings captured the soul of Texas, the matriarch whose love had created a family that would endure for generations. Thomas stood at the graveside with his own children and grandchildren around him. He told them the story his parents had told him many times, about how his mother had arrived on a cold winter day, given to a cowboy she had never met, and how his father had said they should learn each other by the fire. "They learned each other so well," Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion, "that they became one soul in two bodies. They taught all of us what real love looks like. Not the easy, simple kind you read about in stories, but the hard one, everyday kind that gets stronger with time." The family returned to the ranch house after the funeral, gathering as they always had around the fire. They told stories of Vincent and Willa, laughing and crying, keeping their memory alive through the sharing of all they had been and done. And late that night, after everyone else had gone to bed, Thomas sat alone in his grandmother's chair and looked at the flames dancing in the hearth. He thought about his parents, about the unlikely love story that had created everything he held dear. He thought about the courage it must have taken for his mother to stay, for his father to reach out, for both of them to believe that love could grow from such an uncertain beginning. The fire crackled and popped, and for just a moment, Thomas could have sworn he smelled his mother's lavender soap and his father's pipe tobacco. He smiled, knowing it was just his imagination, but comforted by it nonetheless. "Thank you," he whispered to the empty room, to the memories that filled it, to the parents who had shown him what it meant to build a life worth living. "For everything." The fire burned on through the night, as it had for 43 winters before, a symbol of the warmth and love that Vincent and Willa had kindled in that first uncertain meeting. And in the morning, when the sun rose over the Dalton ranch, it shone on a legacy of love that would endure for generations to come, all because a scared girl and a lonely cowboy had decided to learn each other by the fire. Years became decades, and the Dalton name became synonymous with Fort Worth itself. The ranch Thomas managed grew into a sprawling operation that employed dozens of families. His children and grandchildren spread throughout Texas and beyond, carrying with them the values Vincent and Willa had instilled: hard work, integrity, kindness, and above all, the belief that love was something you built day by day, choice by choice. The house Vincent had constructed with his own hands was eventually added to the National Register of Historic Places. Tourists came to see the home where one of Texas's great ranching dynasties had begun, to walk the rooms where Vincent and Willa had raised their family, to sit in chairs by the fireplace where a love story for the ages had unfolded. In the small museum the family created in the original bunkhouse, visitors could see Willa's drawings, Vincent's tools, the letter Willa Norton had written begging a stranger to care for his daughter. They could read journals and letters that documented the growth of the ranch and the deepening of a love that had started with 4 uncertain days and lasted a lifetime. But more than the physical artifacts, what endured was the story itself. It was told and retold, passed down through generations, modified and embellished, but always carrying the essential truth at its core: that love could bloom in the most unlikely circumstances, that strangers could become soulmates, that a life built on honesty and mutual respect could grow into something extraordinary. A great-great-granddaughter named Willa, for the matriarch she had never met, wrote a book about Vincent and Willa's love story. It became a bestseller, introducing their tale to people across the country who were hungry for proof that real, lasting love existed. Readers wrote letters saying the story had given them hope, had made them believe that they too might find someone to build a life with, someone to learn by the fire. And every year on the anniversary of that cold December day, when Willa Norton had stepped off the train in Fort Worth, the Dalton family gathered at the ranch. They came from California and New York, from small towns and big cities, bringing spouses and children who carried the legacy forward into new generations. They gathered around the fireplace, now carefully preserved exactly as Vincent and Willa had known it, and they told the story again. They talked about courage and faith and the power of choosing love every single day. They talked about the importance of giving people a chance, of looking past first impressions, of being willing to be vulnerable with another person. And always, as the fire burned and the family sat together in the warmth, someone would say the words that had become the family motto, the words Vincent had spoken on that first uncertain night: "Let's learn each other by the fire." It was a reminder that love was not something that simply happened to you, but something you actively chose and nurtured. That the greatest relationships were built not on passion alone, but on the patient work of truly seeing and understanding another person. That home was not a place but a person, and that the right person could transform your entire world. The Dalton family prospered for generations, their roots deep in Texas soil, their branches spreading across the country and the world. But they never forgot where they came from, never forgot the scared Boston girl and the lonely Texas cowboy who had started it all with a simple invitation to sit by the fire and learn each other. And in that way, Vincent and Willa Dalton lived on long after their deaths, their love story becoming the foundation on which generations built their own lives. They had started with nothing but uncertainty and hope, and they had created something that would endure forever. A family bound not just by blood, but by the example of what it meant to truly love another person. The fire in the old ranch house hearth would burn for generations to come, tended by descendants who knew its significance, who understood that it represented something precious and rare. And on winter nights when the Texas wind howled and the stars shone bright overhead, you could almost feel the presence of Vincent and Willa in that room, still sitting in their chairs, still holding hands, still learning each other even in eternity. It was, in the end, the kind of love story that reminded people why they believed in love at all. Not a fairy tale of instant attraction and easy happiness, but a real story of two imperfect people who chose each other every day, who built something beautiful from uncertain beginnings, who proved that the greatest love stories are the ones written slowly, carefully, by the fire where two souls learn to become one. And that legacy, more valuable than all the land and cattle and material wealth the Daltons accumulated over the generations, was the true treasure Vincent and Willa left behind. They taught everyone who came after them that love was worth the risk, worth the uncertainty, worth the patient work of learning another person's heart. They taught that home was something you built together, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one moment by the fire at a time. And in teaching that lesson, they created not just a family but a testament to the enduring power of love, commitment, and the courage to take a chance on a stranger who might just become your everything. The story of Vincent and Willa Dalton became more than just family history. It became legend, myth, a beacon of hope for anyone who had ever doubted whether true love existed. And every time someone told the story, every time a new generation gathered by the fire to hear how it all began, Vincent and Willa's love was renewed, their legacy continued, their truth affirmed. Love was real. Love was possible. Love could bloom from the most unlikely beginnings and grow into something that would outlast any individual life, rippling forward through time, touching hearts and changing lives for generations to come. And it all started with a simple invitation on a cold winter night. Let's learn each other by the fire. Those words, spoken by a cowboy to a frightened girl, became the foundation of a love that would never die, a story that would never end, a legacy that would endure as long as there were people who believed in the transforming power of love, patience, and the courage to open your heart to another human being. Vincent and Willa Dalton had taken a chance on each other, and in doing so, they had created something immortal. Their love story lived on in every happy marriage in their family tree, in every choice to be kind and patient and understanding, in every moment when someone decided that love was worth the risk. And on winter nights in Texas, when the fire burns bright and the wind whispers across the prairie, if you listen carefully, you can almost hear them still. A cowboy and his wife, learning each other by the fire, building a love that would echo through eternity, proving that the greatest adventures begin not with grand gestures but with simple invitations and the courage to say yes.